Hi all, thanks for attending our live Facebook post video. This is Living with Fire, and we are at Moana Nursery. Here we have Ed Smith, Natural Resource Specialist and co-manager of the Living with Fire program, along with Lisa Braggington at Moana Nursery, and we're going to talk about choosing the right plants for Nevada's high fire hazard areas. So take it away, Ed.
Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Ed Talks. And we're here at Moana Lane Nursery, and we're going to talk about good plant choices for wildfire-prone neighborhoods. Joining me here today from Moana is Lisa. Lisa, what's your title?
I'm a plant doctor, if you will, one of the horticulturists on staff.
All right, Lisa's going to help me describe some of the plants that we're going to talk about here today. What's growing in your yard can have a profound influence on your house surviving a wildfire, particularly what's growing within 30 feet of the house. And not only is what's growing there important, but how those plants are maintained. That can make a big difference on these plants igniting or not. Now, unfortunately, there's not been a lot of research done that's evaluated different ornamental plants in terms of their fire hazard. And what we found as a substitute is a lot of anecdotal plant lists. And so there's tons of plant lists out there on good choices and bad choices in fire hazard areas. But oftentimes they don't talk about how those ratings were derived on. And in fact, I got plant lists where some people say this is a good plant choice, others say that this is a bad plant choice. At any rate, so that really confounds things in making good decisions for wildfire-prone communities. However, we do have some rules of thumb. And our rules of thumb are we want plants with a high moisture content, high water content. We want to use low-growing plants versus tall plants. Again, low-growing plants, less fuel, produce shorter flames, and so shorter plants, and particularly less than 3 feet, are good choices. And then we want plants that lack flammable chemicals, like volatile oils that are contained in a lot of our coniferous shrubs and trees. Now, with that in hand, the recommendations that we've come up with is within 30 feet of our house, we want to emphasize herbaceous plants. And herbaceous plants, like these, are plants that do not have woody stems. So shrubs and trees have woody stems. Herbaceous plants don't. And herbaceous plants include annual and perennial flowers, succulents, also turf and grass are considered herbaceous plants. A lot of times these plants can range between 70 to 80% water by weight, and so higher the moisture content, the better. The harder it is to ignite, and the cooler it's going to burn if it does ignite. Now, Lisa, what herbaceous plants do we have here today?
Well, we have a blanket flower, and there is actually a blanket flower that is native to northern Nevada, so it is drought adapted. Lots and lots of flowers, so from a horticultural standpoint, a real standout. Basically blooms all summer long. The blanket flower just dovetails perfectly with the kind of considerations you'd make, because we've got nice low foliage, plenty of moisture being held with relatively low water being supplemented. Great plant for a fire-prone area. This is a hosta. These are generally native to Japan. This guy actually needs quite a bit of shade and moisture to do his thing. Kind of a nice thing though, speaking about not producing woody stems, this guy goes through any type of stress. He's just going to literally prickle like tissue paper. So he's not going to be much of a fuel load, even if, say, a house were abandoned or that kind of thing.
Now, are all hostas male? No, sorry to interrupt.
Boy, it's a good thing we're not going into the trees here. This is a cone flower. This one's kind of another fancy one. Great plant choice again for a long season of bloom. Critter resistant, adds a lot of color to your water-wise, fire-resistant landscape.
We just got a comment, good information, so thank you, Andrew, for that comment.
Thanks, Andrew, yes. Stella d'Oro daylilies, that's this guy here. Probably one of the most common plants that you'll see in commercial and residential landscapes. Great choice, again, goes back down to a tuberous root. So again, something that's going to be fairly water thrifty. It's not going to provide, should it go without water, it's not going to provide a hazard down the road. And then of course the succulent groups, this is a sedum. What a hot number of these guys are these days in horticulture. Succulents are very popular for desks, for office environments, and of course they're great for that fire resistant landscape because they're going to get by with little water, add lots of beauty, and not take a lot of water but really be fire resistant.
All right, so we want to emphasize herbaceous plants within 30 feet of your house, and in particular within 5 feet of your house. What happens oftentimes in our fires, we get an ember storm, and the embers pelt the side of the house, and then they start to collect in that first 5 feet around the home. So we want the least or the most ignition-resistant plant materials grown there, as well as some non-combustible materials. Now let's move over here. Also within your 30 feet, you can have some woody plant materials. Particularly deciduous, low-growing deciduous shrubs. And so if you want to use that in your landscape, look for deciduous shrubs that are less than 3 feet tall at maturity, or that can be easily maintained at that height. We have some great examples here. What do we got here, Lisa?
So this is Arctic willow. This is a great, graceful plant. They will need to be trimmed to keep them low, but as you can see, as we've done here in the nursery, this would only be about 18 inches in the ground. Over time, this is going to get to be fairly large, even with regular trimming. So these are the kinds of things that when you're first putting the landscape in, you might not be thinking about, but this could be a ladder type plant if it was left untrimmed. This is a barberry, and this selection is a nice dwarf one. This is going to follow nicely into that parameter of wanting to keep low stems. Willow is going to take quite a bit of water. Barberry is pretty water thrifty when they're done. So again, those kind of considerations, if, for instance, if you're traveling, irrigation system's off, are you going to be leaving a fuel load behind? So a lot of the time in our conversations, we're talking both of how fire prone or what kind of dangers are posed, but also we work water-wise into that because of some of those considerations. Great little butterfly bush. We're so happy to see butterfly bush coming back and being a popular element because the breeding has gone from a plant that really wouldn't be suitable in the fire-resistant landscape because they were plants that easily got 8 to 10 feet tall. Here we've got a nice group of dwarf plants that really add a lot of beauty all summer long, like your typical butterfly bush, but don't get any taller than maybe.
Yeah, I was really delighted to find out that there was a dwarf cultivar.
Yeah.
I was unaware of that.
Yeah, it's such a great choice. And then here's our standby potentilla. Just a great plant for critter resistance, low water use when it's established, and lots of flowers all summer long.
Now, also within that 30 feet area, if you're going to have trees, we emphasize deciduous trees, well maintained. Make sure we don't have a lot of combustible shrubs underneath them that can allow a fire to get up into the tree canopy. Now, the downside, or plant choices that we need to be more concerned about, as our rule of thumb, is that if we're going to use evergreens or coniferous plants, I should say, it's best to use them outside the 30-foot area of our home. And in particular, one of the most notorious shrubs in our wildfires that have threatened homes are the ornamental junipers, the Chinese juniper, tan junipers. There's a bunch that I can't tell them apart.
They are very hard to tell apart.
And when they're young, it's not so much an issue, but as they get older, they start to retain a lot of dead branchlets within the crown, and they also retain a litter of fallen scale-like leaves that accumulate over time. And what happens is embers produced by the fire land inside that crown, ignite the dead plant material, and that gets the rest of this plant going. And this plant has a lot of volatile oils contained in it. It can burn very hot. Unfortunately, it's a very popular plant in northern Nevada to plant as a foundation planting right next to our homes. But we recommend that if you have them, remove them and keep them at least 30 feet away from the home. This plant was identified in the Collin fire and the Waterfall fire, both as contributing factors to home loss because they were planted right adjacent to the home. Anything else you'd like to add, Lisa?
I want to thank you for the opportunity to be here, and also just say, this is such a great community service. As we were talking earlier, I talked to a lot of customers who really don't consider the fire factor in their landscaping. And as we know, we can look out on the hills right now and see all that smoke, which is not making any of us any happier with all of this high heat. Just be more aware. Truly, I know it's a catchphrase because it's a good phrase. So.
Well, thank you to Moana Nursery in sharing these great plant materials with us. And we'll see you next time on Ed Talks.
Well, actually, I have a question.
Okay.
So what's the publication that people can use if they would like to see other types of
I'm
plants?
glad you asked, Jamie. You can contact the Cooperative Extension Office and most of your local fire service and request a publication choosing the right plants for Northern Nevada's high fire hazard areas. A lot of the stuff I talked about, what are good attributes and bad attributes of plant choices, it's all described inside this publication, and we also have examples of good choices that meet our criteria.
Great. Well, thank you for watching our Facebook Live post and for joining us for Ed Talks. If you are interested in watching more of our Ed Talks, I actually have a question. How about strawberry plants or succulents? How close can those be planted to your house?
Those will both be excellent choices. They fit our category of herbaceous plants. Succulents have the highest percent moisture content by plant group, up to 85%. The next group down are these herbaceous annual perennial flowers as well as grasses, as long as they're green and actively growing. Now, when these herbaceous plants cure for the year, come fall, they're a bad choice because the moisture's gone, they're very dry, they're very easy to ignite. So when they get to that phase, we need to remove that top growth and get ready for next year.
Great. Okay. Well, again, thanks for tuning in to Ed Talks. If you would like to have a notification that we are live, you can actually click the follow button that's below on this video, or even if you're not even watching it live, you can click the follow button then. And thanks again for joining. Thanks for having us, Lisa.
Thank you.